Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, you know what? I've been watching this. I've been watching on Peacock. It's so dumb. It's criminal. And it's hosted by Snoop.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the Snoop.
I have not even heard about this.
And we just happened across it, and now we watch them all again. But it's videos of dumb criminals. And they have, oh gosh, what do they call it? High crimes? Because of course they do.
Of course.
But they also have had, they did one episode, and it was 3 Texas attorneys commercials.
Okay.
And they had, okay, there's this guy, and he's like, pow, 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 and he's just yelling. He's just yelling the whole commercial. And he's in a suit. And at the end, and they kept showing a American eagle. Okay, Texas. They kept showing this American eagle and like a flag, and then they do the eagle sound behind it, and he'd yell some more. Yes, right? And he jumps on a dirt bike, and it's got a big American flag on it, and he pops a wheelie, and Jeff's like, you know, that flag probably touched the ground. Oh, yeah. That's what I love. Like, we always point out when somebody's like uber patriotic, which at this point is nationalistic, and like they do something wrong with the flag, and I'm like, I know what to do with the flag and what not to do with the flag.
And actually, those people who have the flag in the back of their truck and they never take it down, that's really disrespectful because it turns
getting
into
rained
a rag.
on, it's getting dirty.
Yes.
Yeah, and so. Or like when you wear it, like that's technically problematic. But then I was like, when they were making Trump flags, I was like, oh my God, like you can't claim to be patriotic and then fly a flag next to the American flag for any candidate. To be clear, I was like, that whole thing to me was so wrong. But anyway, so it's just this hysterical commercial. But then they do another one, and it's another guy yelling, "I'm an attorney," and he's like. He's in this giant truck, and he's got like a mohawk and the side of his head shaved, kind of. And he's this big man. Kind of. And he gets in this big truck, and he just yells, "I'm an attorney," and he hits a car in front of him. He's like, if you get in my way, I'm going to plow right through you, because I'm an attorney. And he's hitting this car over and over, and you see this dude driving it, trying not to laugh in the commercial, because they're all low budget.
I have got to look this up.
Yes. It was hysterical. And he's sitting there in one episode, and they bring on these attorneys who are cannabis attorneys in California, because they started when one of the props was like making it hard for medical marijuana, like putting blockades in people's way who could technically legally get marijuana before. And that's when they came. So it's these 2 old white-haired guys, you know, and one of them standing like it's just their faces framed in the screen, right? So one's standing right behind the other one so they can be that way. And he's just smoking a blunt. And the guy in front is like, what do we say when the police pull us over? And they're like, what have you been doing? What were you? Did you know why I pulled you over? And then the guy with the blunt takes the blunt out of his mouth, and he's like, what is he? Oh, he has all the answers. And so they're doing this. And he's asking the question, and he's like, no, I do not. Yeah, and then he puts the blunt back in his mouth, and he's like, what do you say if they ask you what you've been doing? And he takes the blunt out of his hall. I will not discuss my day with you. Puts the blunt back in. And then they ask something else, and he takes it out, and he's like, I invoke the 5th. And that's the commercial, is them saying, here's how you handle it if you get pulled over and you have drugs. And so they had them on the show. They also had the Yelling Texas Hit Them guy. They bring some of them on the show, and they're talking to them, and they're sitting there, and Snoop's just smoking a blunt. But so the way it works to show it is all the blunts have to be like pixelated out. So even in the commercial they showed, they pixelated out the joint.
I was like, how do they do that? Oh my God. I gotta look this up.
So, and other than that, it's all those dumb criminal things that are just so fun to watch. It's just like security camera, ring cameras. They have a bunch of people like bust people as they're stealing stuff off their...
Yes.
And
I just saw one on TikTok, and it was, I don't know if the guy saw them coming up and had some kind of speaker, or if he had his truck set up so if you open the door, the speaker went off. But this guy comes up and he tries the door and it won't open, and then his friend is like, no, try the other door. So he tries the other door and it opens. It's like, get out of my truck, motherfucker. It's like, falls down. It's like a cartoon. You know, his legs are trying to move and he can't, and he's
oh God, yeah, just dumb criminals. But
my God, I hope they do a Waffle House episode.
Oh, that's what I wanted to tell you. That's why I brought it up. They did the one where the dude tied the dork, but they had the footage of him falling out of the ceiling when he's at the Waffle House, and he uses an item of clothing, they said, which his jeans with his wallet in them.
It's his pants.
I went, Jeffrey, if we covered this on the podcast, on the Waffle House episode, because Snoop was like, that's my favorite place to eat. Like, they can't fuck with my favorite place to eat. And another guy there was like, oh no, I've been there when so it's going down. But each time he's on it, and then he has Takara, I think her name is, and she's the one who like runs the clips and announces them, and then he and the others are kind of there for the comic relief. So he always has 2 or 3 other guys, some of whom I recognize, like comedians. Mm-hmm. And there was one woman who was in a couple episodes, you know, so he's got friends that come on, and like Jim Jeffries, who did the Freedom stand-up special, who's from Australia, and there's several. Dion Cole, some people that you would recognize if you saw them. But so he has them on and they just do like the...
Oh, that sounds so fun.
Yeah, it was so funny. And the Jeff was like, wait, there's only one season. We have to watch one a day. And I was like, no, you have to maybe another one. And so of course it took us like 3 days to get through it, trying to spread them out.
It was funny because when we were in Florida, I looked at Joe and I said, you know what? This is one of the few states where I would consider eating at a Waffle House.
Well, it originated in Georgia, right? So I was like, here's where we should eat Waffle House. I eat at Waffle House here, but I did before I couldn't have eggs. Kind of ruins breakfast when you can't have eggs.
Yeah, it does.
It does for me. I'm not a big pancake person. I like me some French toast, which has eggs.
Last time we recorded, I don't know if I told you about this. So I get home, and like, as soon as I left, my blood sugar like evaporated. My hands were shaking. I was so hungry. So I get home, I walk in the house, and I look at Joe and I said, hi, I love you. I got to go get something to eat right now or I'm going to kill pretty much everybody. So he's like, okay. And I just decide for some reason, my God, French toast. That's what I want to eat. So I get out the griddle and I'm heating it up and I'm mixing up the egg and I'm soaking the bread and I get it going. I make French toast. I put maple syrup on it, of course. I sit down and I take a bite and it tastes so good. And I take a second bite and I'm like, that didn't taste right. And we have Lucy's on the phone, on speakerphone, because we usually talk to her on Sundays. And I go, through a mouthful of French toast, I yell, I can't eat this. And I run in the kitchen and I'm spitting it out in the sink and rinsing out my mouth. And of course, Joe and Lucy are like, what the fuck is going on? And Lucy's all, has Mom finally lost her mind? And I come back in and I go, there was apparently soap on the griddle because I got a big mouthful of soap. And what I think happened was we washed it and set it behind the faucet while it was drying and didn't notice soap splashed on it. And because I was just like, now I'm going to have diarrhea because that's what happens when you eat soap. Yeah, it was a fun time. I did not. Wow. Just for the record, I did not, but...
We did finish up late last time because because then Jeffrey was like, what do you want to eat? And he was like, you want barbecue, don't you? And he was right. And so we went to go try and get barbecue.
To say to you, you want barbecue. Right?
It's true.
Yeah.
But anyway. He loves me. He knows what I like. And so we drive out there and it's closed. And we've gone there after recording on Sundays before, but they close at 7.
It was also Easter.
Oh, that's right.
Because Joe's like...
How many times can I forget it was Easter? Leading up to it, following it. I just don't care.
Because Joe was like, okay. But when we got off the phone, he's like, I'm going to take you out to get some ice cream. Because we have that cool cups and cones near us. And we get there and I'm like, they're closed. I said, well, pull up so I can see what the sign says. And I look at him and I go... Oh,
it's Easter.
Jesus, it's Easter.
Yeah, so it was closed, and he's like, uh-oh. Because I get a thing where my stomach is set on a food, and I can't eat something else because I will mentally taste it once we decide to get it. It's really weird.
No, yes. I get it.
And so if I get low blood sugar and that happens to me, I can like melt down like nobody's business. Then I have to reset it. I have to figure out something that will reset it. And he was like, do you want some chickens? And I was like, okay, because that is like the second thing right now that works because no migraines from it. Raising Cane's has nitrites and MSG. I don't
I've not
remember.
been
It
to
has
Slim
one or the other, and they
Chickens.
both cost
I've
me.
not been to Slim Chickens yet. I'm so mad.
If they had been closed, like, he probably would have been like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. We were driving by, In-N-Out is no longer busy because we drive by there to get to Slim Chickens. Like, they're busy, but they're not busy anymore. And then, but Whataburger has lines back to Torchy's Tacos still. Whataburger is the one I haven't tried because I had In-N-Out when I went to California, but I haven't tried Whataburger. And I won't until it's about a year old and the lines aren't long. And I'll have it and I'll go, yep, that's a burger. And then I'll go back to Drifters.
Yep.
So, yeah, well, you know. Oh, we're going to get started early even though we both have short stories.
I was going to say, is it time for... I was actually just picking up the paper so I would have it in my lap when you gave me the signal. When you gave me the hairy eyeball of what are you
When I look at it and go, shit, it's 22 minutes in. No, we can start. Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try.
Okay, so I have two titles for this one.
I see that.
So one is just Blanche Taylor Moore. And the other one is those sweet little church ladies in North Carolina. And I realized why this one sounded familiar. There was a woman, so spoiler alert, this is about arsenic poisoning. There was a woman who was put to death in North Carolina for poisoning. And I didn't write down her name because I said, I'll remember it. What the fuck? I can't remember anything. So that happened just a few years before this happened. Because see, I thought women stopped arsenic poisoning people in like the 1800s.
There's probably still somebody doing it.
Probably.
I mean, it was rat poison, which typically had arsenic in it in 9 to 5, right? When they try and kill Dabney Coleman.
That's true.
I don't think it went out that long ago.
Oh, wow. So
speaking of which, I saw the Sandra Bullock movie, The Lost City or whatever.
Did you love it?
It was pretty funny.
Some of the writer stuff in the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
Killed me.
But, yeah, so there's the whole shit. What was I thinking of it? Oh no! It was something you said, and it reminded me of something in that movie. It's gone. Oh, they chloroform her.
Oh, that's right.
In the plane, and she comes to, and she's like, my body's not working, and she's falling, because Sandra Bullock is great with physical comedy.
Yes, she is.
And so there's a whole thing with that, and then she's like, do people still chloroform people, or whatever? That made me think of that.
Yes.
And they're like, well, it worked.
So
Daniel Radcliffe.
Things are a classic for a reason.
That's right. So anyway, proceed.
So my sources are the True Crime Page a Day calendar. I get more story ideas out of that damn thing. Murderpedia, Wikipedia, and the Cinemaholic website.
All right.
So, Blanche Kaiser was born in North Carolina in 1933 to Flonnie, like Lonnie with an F in front of it.
Okay.
Flonnie and Parker Davis Kaiser. She had 3 to 7 siblings. I was never able to nobody talks about them. So
yeah, there's been a couple where they're like, they have these siblings, and I'm like, okay. And that's it.
Can we have, right. I mean, I couldn't find out more about her mom. I couldn't find out about her siblings. So anyway, her dad was a mill worker, an ordained Baptist minister, a womanizer. That was the Wikipedia word. And an alcoholic. Now, Blanche later claimed he forced her into prostitution. I'm not laughing.
I'm just going to apologize because my cat's being an asshole today, and we wouldn't be able to record if I stopped it. So you're all just going to hear her. Because my son's done with her because she's gone in and out of his room about 20 times while we were recording. So he's not going to open that door again, and she's going to whine at it.
So that's why I was laughing. I was not laughing at what I was saying. But Blanche later claimed that her father forced her into prostitution to pay off his gambling debts. Now, this was reported several times, but I could find nothing to back it up. I couldn't
Yeah.
ever. So she said several things while she was on trial that were not exactly true. So in May of 1952, and this is just so many dates because I'm like, I got to get this in the right order. In May of 1952, Blanche marries James Napoleon Taylor, and they had 2 kids. It appears that she married a man who was a lot like her dad in that he drank a lot and was prone to gambling away all the family's money. And apparently had, I think it was a second marriage for him, because she said something about he had infidelities in his first marriage. And he would occasionally just disappear for the whole weekend. And then when he came home, magically all of their money was gone. So in 1954, Blanche started to work for Kroger as a cashier. For anybody who doesn't know, Kroger is a grocery store chain. They own Dillon's and King Super and probably some other stuff. But back east, it's just called
I think
Kroger.
they even now own Fred Meyer's in Oregon, I think. They
might.
Yeah.
So anyway, in 54, Blanche starts working at Kroger as a cashier. By 1959, she was the head cashier, that's as high as a woman could go working for Kroger at that time. So she reportedly had affairs with several of her male coworkers. And in 1962, she began an affair with her store manager, Raymond Reed. In September of 1966, Blanche, now an adult, I got to backtrack for a second, though. When she married James Taylor, so this was in 1952. One of the more sensational stories I read said she married young to escape her father. In 1952, she was 19.
That's not getting married young.
No, especially not in 1952.
Right.
It was...
Now people wait until like their late 20s and 30s at this point, at least. But no.
I was like, what? No, that was just, oh God, what is the word for exaggerated reporting?
Oh, yeah.
Red journalism.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm thinking of? So anyway,
sensationalism.
Exactly. In September of 1966, Blanche tries to reconcile with her father, but his health takes a turn for the worse. So because she's trying to reconcile, she remains at his side, trying to nurse him back to health, but he died soon after of what was ruled a heart attack. In 1968, just 2 years later, Blanche's husband James has a massive and nearly fatal heart attack and found Jesus. He got religion after the heart attack.
Well, when you almost die, when you get incarcerated, and when you go to AA.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
So, Blanche told her friends that he then became the perfect husband and father. She wasn't moved enough to end her affairs, but she did brag about how, he was more attentive, he was more helpful, he was more present. In 1970, Blanche's mother-in-law fell ill, and after a few months was bedridden. And having nursed her father when he was ill, Blanche did her best to make her mother-in-law comfortable as well. And when the woman passed in November of that year, the doctors attributed it to natural causes, because she had been sick for a long time. So, spoiler alert, the doctors were idiots, and Blanche was not so much comforting as murdering. Although they didn't prove those two. But we'll get there. I was like, I can't keep writing it and she was just helping.
Right. I can only depict it this way for so long.
I can only keep a straight face. So there's her boss and her lover, Raymond Reed. In 1971, he leaves his wife and children, gets an apartment, and files for divorce. So Blanche develops a new habit of stopping by his apartment every morning and fixing his breakfast. And she told friends she did it because he was just helpless without her. If he can't fix his own toast in the morning, he's helpless is one word for it. So James had another heart attack and died in late 1973. And she and Reed began publicly dating pretty much 10 minutes later. It's immediately. So here's the thing. So they're together for a number of years. He thinks they're getting married. In 1985, she started dating Robert Hutton, who is Kroger's regional manager. After that relationship ended, and it ended badly, it was in October of that year, she sued Hutton and Kroger for sexual harassment. Kroger eventually, and this takes a couple of years, settled out of court for $275,000. And Hutton was forced to resign. He should be happy he resigned.
None of my sexual harassment was ever that profitable, but I guess I wasn't pressing charges.
See, now you know.
Now I know. Don't worry, they're not going to do it now. I'm 44 years old and got ID'd for alcohol the other day, and I was pissed because I couldn't have it. I was like, are you serious?
Where did you get ID'd?
The theater.
Really?
It was bad. It was bad because I went there specifically to cheat for sugar.
Oh.
And so I went there for the Robert Brownie Jr., you guys. It's a movie theater with a restaurant inside it. And so I was craving brownie and ice cream. So that was perfection. And ordered it. And she was like, we're out of those. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to substitute other sugar, so I'll have a dry glass of red wine. So I asked for that, and she's like, can I get your ID? And I was just like, that is poor form when I'm clearly a middle-aged woman and obviously old enough when you've just told me you don't have what I want, and I say I can't have anything else, and you ID me. But then Jeff was like, oh, then I would like a glass of red wine. He put his ID down, so I was able to have it. Because I was like, I'm just going to leave because I came here for something specific, and we're going to go find it.
You always get carded. Remember that time?
I only get carded when I don't have my ID.
No, remember that time we went out to dinner with Patrick?
Yeah, at like the black and white chocolate place.
Yeah, something like that. Or white chocolate.
Yeah.
And so the three of us sit down. Anyone like anything to drink? And Patrick, of course, orders like water or Mountain Dew. And I'm like, oh, I'd love a glass of wine. Guy writes it down, turns to, and this wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Turns to Shan, what would you like to drink? And she's like, I'd like a glass of wine. He's like, may I see some ID?
And he said, so you don't want a tip today, do you?
And he looks at me blankly, like, huh? And I'm like, really? You're IDing her and you didn't. Obviously, I am so old and haggard. There's no chance you need my ID. And he's
like, oh shit. Can I?
And he's like, do you want to show me your ID? No, you've ruined it now.
That's right. If you're going to ID one person at the table,
you ID everybody. All. Yes. Okay. Hutton has resigned from Kroger. And also in 1985, Blanche accused an unknown pervert of setting 2 fires at her trailer. I thought it was 2 fires at her trailer. No, there was a trail, and it was arson. So the fire department, the police just said yes. She said there was a strange man lurking about. That's obviously who set the fire. And she used that money to buy a new trailer, a better trailer. When that one caught fire, she said the same thing. They said, well, it must have been the same guy. Yeah. Okay. So it was North Carolina. Then came Easter.
What's that again? Because I always forget it exists. Apparently.
Right? So she met and almost immediately fell in love with the Reverend Dwight Moore, who is pastor of the Carolina United Church of Christ. So they began meeting regularly, but she had to hide the relationship because of her ongoing suit against Kroger, because she said she was, and here's a quote, completely alienated and antagonistic towards men and has not been able to maintain any meaningful social contacts with the opposite sex. Despite the fact she's still boink and read, and now she's also boinking. But
it wasn't meaningful.
Well, it was a contact, though. And at some point in all of this, she asks Moore to get her some arsenic-based ant poison.
Okay.
In 1986, this is just a year later, Reed was diagnosed with shingles, which are quite painful. So he was hospitalized in April and died in October, and the doctors attributed it to Guillain-Barré syndrome. That's a really hard thing to pronounce. After his death, immediately, Blanche and Reverend Moore began dating publicly. Took the relationship public. There was an engagement, but it got pushed back because Blanche was diagnosed with breast cancer and needed to get it treated. Then Moore developed a mysterious medical ailment which required 2 surgeries for an intestinal blockage. They were finally married in April of 1989 and had a long weekend to honeymoon up in New Jersey. I think he actually had a brand new grandbaby, and they went up to meet the new grandbaby. Shortly after they returned to North Carolina, Moore became ill and collapsed after eating food that Blanche had given him. Mm-hmm. I don't think she necessarily prepared the food, but she gave it to him. It gets a little confusing, so I simplified it. He was hospitalized and transferred between 3 different hospitals before they finally got him to the bigger hospital, and his condition kept deteriorating. He was actually on the verge of multiple organ failure, and that's just never good. No. I mean, people often don't come back from that. So Blanche told the doctors he'd been working in the yard with an herbicide when they got back from their honeymoon. So the 4 doctors involved in this case ordered a tox screen to check for the herbicide and discovered that Moore had 20 times the lethal dose of arsenic in his system, which at that time was the most arsenic found inside.
Right, because usually it's like
a living patient.
2 times.
Yeah, no. They said he had what they called a robust metabolism. Not metabolism, constitution.
Okay.
They said he was very robust and healthy, and he slid through this. Although Moore eventually recovered, he never regained full sensation in his hands and feet. That's one of the things of arsenic poisoning, apparently. So the police were called. When they found all the arsenic, they finally called the police. And they were just happy to come in and investigate. So they discovered that Blanche had tried to make herself the beneficiary of Moore's pension. So here's a tip. Here's a hot tip. If your new spouse wants to make you the beneficiary, that's fine. If you want to make yourself the beneficiary of somebody else's pension, yeah, that doesn't fly.
That's not how that works.
No. So Moore mentioned Reed to the police and that he had died of Guillain-Barré. And they finally kind of clicked that those symptoms mimic those of arsenic poisoning. There's apparently a lot of the same symptoms. So then Reed, the first husband to Taylor, and her father, Parker Kaiser, were all exhumed and tested, along with Blanche's first mother-in-law, Taylor's mother, all tested positive for high levels of arsenic, with Reed's and Taylor's in the fatal range. Reed's family came forward to say that they had pressed for an autopsy back when Reed had died, but Blanche had fought them. So there hadn't been an autopsy. So when questioned, Blanche said that both Reed and Taylor had been depressed and had probably just taken the arsenic on themselves. Because that's what one does. Investigators grew more suspicious when, so they want to test Moore's hair. He's in the hospital, so they want to test his hair for...
She shave him?
She had his hair cut, so do you know what the investigators did? They tested his pubic hair.
Oh, nice!
I guess Blanche didn't think to shave down there.
Oh. Don't they have to pluck it? Or no, I guess it's in the hair. It's not in the follicle. Or I don't know.
I didn't go that far. I just giggled and kept going. So Blanche was arrested and charged with the murders of Reed and Taylor and assault with a deadly weapon for Moore. While she was in custody, this one cracked me out. While she was in custody, but before the trial started, Blanche received a letter in the mail, in jail, from a man named Garvin Thomas, who claimed that he had poisoned Reed and Moore in a jealous rage because he was wildly, madly in love with Blanche. Conveniently, Garvin Thomas himself had passed away shortly after sending the letter. And inconveniently, it was proven that Blanche herself had written the letter. So you see why I'm like, this is why people aren't going to believe anything she said about anything. At the trial, Blanche denied that she had given Reed any food. Prosecution produced 53 witnesses.
Oh my God.
Who saw her at the hospital daily bringing Reed food, including homemade pudding and milkshakes. So much of the evidence that convicted Blanche was actually supplied by the Reed family lawyers. So in November of 1990, Blanche was convicted of first-degree murder of Reed, and the jury recommended the death sentence. So at her sentencing, the judge concurred.
They should just feed her arsenic-laced food during her term.
She's been on death row in North Carolina for over 31 years.
So,
yeah, she's still on death row. In 2010, Blanche and 11 other death row inmates filed a motion to convert their death sentences to life imprisonment.
It already is.
She is currently the oldest woman on death row. And when Blanche was given the death penalty, charges were dropped in the murder of Taylor and the assault on Moore. She's already had the death penalty. What are they going to do that's worse than that?
Yeah.
So not spending the state's money. Her father and her ex-mother-in-law both had high levels of arsenic, but it wasn't lethal.
Okay.
So that was why
I've
they
seen that in some of the past cases.
Yeah. So what was interesting, minorly interesting, the woman who played Samantha Stevens on Bewitched, Elizabeth Montgomery, played Blanche in a movie adaptation. I can't even remember. I have a copy of the book, so I will post that. But I was just like, Samantha? Sweet, innocent Samantha?
I mean, it was, Meryl Streep that played the Dingo Ate My Baby mom?
Yeah.
In the thing. So, she took that seriously, and in the meantime, here they are villainizing.
Yep. So I didn't think people were still,
why it's a
poisoning.
classic. Why not use it if it works?
Poison, yes. It was the fact that they were still using arsenic.
It still works.
But it's so obvious. There's so many less obvious things. I mean, your eyeball, the blue cast to your skin or your eyes, and the writhing and the vomiting and the limbs. It's just
writhing and vomiting in the limbs. Is this a Clive Barker story?
Yes. It just seems like if you were going to poison someone, there are equally effective ways to do it that aren't as immediately obvious.
Yeah, eye drops.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Not that I'm planning on poisoning anyone.
I've got others. They're stored in my head.
Who got poisoned with eye drops?
For the story I heard, I'm sure there's been others. Also, my muscle relaxers are lethal if I take too many.
Well, yeah.
You can kill people with those.
Well, good to
I
know.
have those right upstairs. Would you like me to get you some more water?
No, thank you. I'm good. Thanks. Water, it would be hard to poison me with water, but...
Depends how long I let it sit there before I added ice to it.
You could make me a cup of tea and put practically anything in there, and I'll just drink it.
I have a new sweetener. It's an artificial sweetener. You're going to like it.
It's bitter.
It has a bit of a bitter chemical taste underneath it, but I mean, it really does. They all do.
What are you going to talk about this week?
I'm not poisoning anybody. I need to have an alibi. If you're thinking of starting a podcast or even just starting to research it, Buzzsprout is your go-to source for information and hosting. They have tons of videos and write-ups on everything you need to know about recording and distributing a podcast, and they even provide easy ways to get analytics on how your podcast is doing. We use Buzzsprout for our podcast hosting, and through them we've been able to connect with tons of resources and distributors. Following a link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and help support our show. A win-win. Not only do they help you get started, but they also do small things to encourage you, such as awarding you badges as you hit various milestones. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. The Spider-Man of Denver is who I'm doing. My sources were the Denver Public Library, an article called The Tale of Denver Spider-Man by Caroline. It's just her first name. She works at the library, apparently. Wikipedia, Historical Crime Detective, which is where I first ran across this. Out There, Colorado article, The Dark and Creepy Tale of Denver Spider-Man by Leslie James. Animalian, Ranker article by Jacob Shelton, and Murderpedia.
Can we sing the Spider-Man theme song?
Yes.
You're like, feel free.
Go ahead. I would take a pause. This story starts with a locked room mystery. I love a locked room mystery.
Yes.
Who doesn't love a locked room mystery? On the evening of October 17th, 1941, neighbors walked over to the house of Philip Peters, a retired railroad worker. His wife was in St. Anthony's Hospital, recovering from a broken hip, and had been there for 3 weeks. That was when they actually kept you in the hospital for things.
For things like recovery.
Yeah. He was supposed to come over for dinner, and he'd been doing that nightly during the hospital stay. The people in the neighborhood liked him, so they're like, you know what, come over. And they were even they give him dinner, and then they give him some to take to work the next day. You know, so it sounds like good a nice guy and good neighbors and a good neighborhood in general. So when he didn't show up to the house where they expected him, they got concerned. To their shock, they saw him lying on the floor inside through a window. They called the police because they tried to get in. All the windows were locked. All the doors were locked. Called the police, and the police found the house was indeed fully locked up. In fact, I think they had to break in because they said that even the slide bar was engaged. You can't do that. You can leave. You can lock a handle as you leave, right?
Yes.
And you can therefore form your own locked room mystery. But if the deadbolt and the slide bolt are done, then yeah,
that's a little different.
A little different. They searched the house after they got in, but they didn't find anyone. There was a small door in a closet ceiling which led up into the tiny attic, and they were like, it was tiny. So they were like, okay, no. And so they left that one alone. Didn't feel anybody could fit through it, and they moved on. Peters had been bludgeoned to death with his cane, an old gun that had fallen apart, and a cast iron stove shaker, and the shaker is what had killed him. It had been cleaned off, but not well, and a bloody towel lay next to the dead man. Like, what's the point? I guess trying to get your fingerprints off, not the blood.
Well, there are some people who feel strongly about cast iron, so
that's right. They're like, I need to temper this now. Not long after, they haven't found anybody. They're still investigating. They're trying to do background checks. Like, who would have a motive for killing this guy? Who didn't like him? And everybody's like, we liked him. So Helen Peters gets released from the hospital, and she moves into the house where her husband had died. And she brings along a housekeeper. Each story had a different, whether the housekeeper was an old friend, whether the housekeeper was hired by, one even said her son came. That's not true because there was only one that said that. So anyway, we're just going to say a housekeeper had agreed to move in with her and help her because she was still having problems and she didn't want to go back into the hospital. And I think a couple of them said she'd even kind of re-injured herself once she was up and moving again. Oh. She was like, I'm not staying here any longer. I can't do this. She kept telling her children, friends, neighbors that strange things were happening in the house. She thought it was haunted. There were weird sounds. There were mysterious stenches. There was missing food. There were items that were in a different place than she was pretty sure she'd put them. You know, that little, am I crazy or has that moved?
Yeah.
The housekeeper, certain the house was haunted, utterly terrified, resigned and left Helen alone in the house. So eventually, Helen moved in with her son, who lived in Grand Junction, Colorado, and left the house on Moncrief Place vacant for a time because she hadn't sold it yet. That's work. It's work, yeah. And a murder just happened in it, and it's unsolved. So, but she's living with her son. House is empty.
What year is this taking place?
It is 1941.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. While the house was vacant, the neighbors started seeing lights turning off and on, movement within the house, shadows. One night, a neighbor went with a baseball bat because she lived next door. She had 5 kids or something like that, and she saw everything going on. She took a baseball bat and walked next door, and I was like, me?
That's what I was thinking. Shannon?
But no one answered. And they were also getting like little drifts of stench, and kids started daring each other to go in. It became that house,
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's the creepy murder house.
Yep.
And now it's haunted, but none of them were brave enough because they'd be out there and the lights would turn on and the shadow would move through there. And so they were like, I can see it from right here and I'm not going inside. So the police are being called constantly. They were being called when Helen was there and they would never find anything. And the neighbors now are really calling because the lights are turning off and on. It's not just like little weird things anymore. And they never found anyone when they showed up. She probably by that point, they were like, here's a key. Just go in whenever you need to. So frustrated by the constant calls and the lack of actual hoodlums in the house, the DPD stationed 2 officers at the house in July 1942.
The lack of actual hoodlums.
That was just me.
I don't. It's a nice turn of phrase.
Thank you. So they're parked across the street, discreet. In July 1942. And again, this crime had happened October 41. Roy Bloxam and Bill Jackson were the cops, and they're parked and they see somebody inside. So they go and they get inside the house and the man has disappeared. But then they hear a click upstairs.
Ah.
And it's him releasing that door, right? So anyway, they run upstairs and there's more noises and they get in there and out of the closet, all they see are these long spindly legs dangling out of this hole in the ceiling. So one of them, it's a small closet. One of them gets in there and he's grabbed these legs and he's pulling and pulling, and the other guy there's trying to help him. And finally they pull this tall ass man out of the ceiling. He falls on the ground. He is filthy. He stinks. His clothes are tattered, and he's just really skinny. Police Chief James Childers would say he was, quote, the strangest looking human I had ever seen. He was a tall man, just under 6 feet, but thin as a wilted weed. His dirty hair hung low over his ears, and his skin was the ugly, unwashed gray of an overcast sky. I wanted to look it up and be like, Police Chief James Childers, author, after he retired, but no. But, yeah, so the guy looked a little disturbing to everybody.
Or disturbed.
This man's name was Theodore Coneys. He was born November 10th, 1882 in Petersburg, Illinois. His father was a Canadian immigrant who owned a hardware store in Illinois, and he died in 1888. I don't know of what. There really wasn't a lot of information on Coneys, and his widow moved with their son, Theodore, to Wisconsin, then Denver, Colorado. She took a job as a housekeeper, and she died in 1911. Coneys was often ill, suffering from what was called respiratory disease, but was never named in any of the articles I could find. And doctors told him he wouldn't live to see the age of 18. He was frail. He took a lot of abuse from other kids about it, as you would. Despite what doctors had said, he lived into adulthood, working as a bookkeeper, a marketer, and a salesman, but he had not graduated school because his mom said, if you're going to die anyway, why go to school?
Okay.
So she took him out, I think, after his dad died. And moved along, And much of the time, he was homeless. Philip and Helen Peters, and Philip was the one who had died, had been members of the Denver Guitar Club, and there they'd met Theodore Coneys when he was younger and become friendly. They'd had him over to their house in the past, and they had lived in that house on Moncrief Place, by the way, for over 3 decades.
Oh, wow.
So it was that same house he'd been a guest at when he was younger. I think they felt for him because he was bedraggled. He wasn't wealthy. And yeah. So anyway, they had entertained him. So they were kind of well off. Like working for a railroad, you wouldn't have been a billionaire or anything, but they were well enough off that they were comfortable, and he had seen that, and he had lived in this poverty and felt that people looked down on him and stuff. So he ended up with some really negative feelings about it, even though they were kind to him. So at some point, Coneys, he found himself once again in a bad way, whether he'd lost his job or whatever is not known. And desperate for food, he went to the Peters house to ask for money, orchestrating a run-in on the street where he bumped into him and he was like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you. And I mean, he was much older.
Right.
And he wasn't like a little willowy teenager anymore, like when they were doing this originally. And he asked for money. And Philip Peters, whose wife had been having a bunch of medical problems, had been in the hospital. So they're buried under medical bills. And he said he couldn't spare any money, So then Theodore got mad and he's kind of started stalking Philip. And he's watching him. And one day he sees Philip forget to lock the door as he leaves. And so Theodore, goes in and he's going to steal food and money. And then he looks around the house while he's there, probably trying to see if there's anything valuable or whatever. And he sees that door into the attic. And so he goes, So he takes that food and he climbs right on up there. And he had been there about 5 weeks from his own word when he finally got caught by Peters. And when Peters caught him, he was standing in front of the ice box, just standing there looking for some food. And Coneys had thought that Peters was gone visiting his wife at the hospital, but Peters had actually just fallen asleep.
Oh.
That's why everything was locked. And I don't know if he was napping on the sofa and got woken up by the noise or what. So, and I haven't given their ages, but Philip Peters was 73 when this happened. And Theodore was 59. He was not a young little grasshopper. Okay. So anyway, Peters, he brandished his cane,
Right.
And he went to hit him because here's this guy in his house.
You scoundrel.
And Coneys took it from him and he used it to attack the older man. It broke. And then he grabbed the gun, which broke because it was like a display. It was an old, I saw a picture of it, it looked like it might have been a revolver and that piece was missing or something. So,
right.
Anyway, then he grabbed that final item, the shaker, and he beat him to death with it. And he was thoroughly beaten. It looked like he'd continued hitting him after he was dead. After he killed Peters, he returned to the attic and he remained there for 9 months or something before the next thing happened. So they found this now. They know found their smallest officer on the Denver Police Department, and they sent him up into the space, and he vomited because Coney's had been collecting his waste in a container and just living up there with that stench, which is what those little drifts were that people were getting.
Oh.
He obviously hadn't bathed. He wasn't coming down and using the shower or a bath or whatever. So almost a year, this dude was living up there with it, surrounded by waste and whatever detritus from food.
What was he eating?
He would just sneak down, grab food, take it up with him.
But I mean, after she moved out.
Yeah, that's the thing I don't know. Like, she must have just left stuff so there was canned stuff. Because he stayed there.
Yeah.
And he talked about, so there's a museum down in Canyon City for one of the old closed penitentiaries, and then there's still, it's the women's, and then there's a men's. But he's got a thing at that.
Oh.
Because I'll get there, but he was there. And so they had the whole write-up on Murderpedia of what they have about him at the museum, which I was like, wow, I didn't remember how sensationalized these little entries were at this museum when I was looking at it. So I really skipped most of what was in there. But it was like him talking about he liked to go out and he'd peer out the windows and he'd see the postman, and he loved to just watch people out there and let them see him or whatever. And so, but anyway, so he was doing this all this time. And yeah, he stank. So Officer Fred Zarnow was quoted as saying, "A man would have to be a spider to stand it long up there." And that's how he got his name.
Oh,
now, he was sleeping on, they were like the leaves of a table, those extra leaves that you take off. There were 2 of them up there in the attic, and that's what he had been sleeping on. Something said an ironing board, but I went with, I saw a picture. So
do you remember how much time elapsed between when the woman moved out, Mrs. Peters, and when he was caught?
No, because it didn't give a date for when she left.
Because when she left, I would have been downstairs. At least
chilling in the bed. I wouldn't have gone back up there, but he did. Like, he'd just gotten so used to living up there at that time. And it was, there are pictures I'll post. I think it's probably about the size. Like, our attic might even be smaller because it's really just, we don't have an attic as such. But it's not a terrible space, but if you're a tall man, it certainly is. Like, I would be very uncomfortable up there, but it's not like an attic. The newspapers, of course, dubbed him the Denver Spider-Man or the Denver Spider-Man of Moncrief Place. Theodore Coneys was convicted for the murder of Philip Peters and given a life sentence, which I was like, good. He was probably happy. He had meals and he had a bed.
Yep. And so, hopefully running water so he could bathe occasionally.
Yeah. One hopes. And he served that in Canyon City. The man who wasn't supposed to see the age of 18 lived to be 84 years old.
Oh my God.
Dying May 16th, 1967. He's now buried in an unmarked grave near the prison. Because even to find a grave is like, it is unmarked. He is somewhere in this prison burial plot. So.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, he wasn't as fun as the name indicated, but he's certainly a disturbing person.
That was like last week's werewolf murder.
Yeah.
It really had nothing to do with
It's like they give it such a big name and they make such a big deal of it. And then you're like, oh, so he killed one person. That's terribly unfortunate. But it wasn't even creative.
He could have come downstairs to go to the bathroom, too. He could have... Anyway, that's going to bother me for a long time.
And, it could be that he'd been homeless for so long that he was accustomed. I don't know.
Yes. If he had been sleeping rough, then sleeping in an enclosed place where he wasn't cold and
I will say he did complain in the prison one that I left so much stuff out of. He was like, my hands and my feet were so cold in the winter up there, but it was still better than being outside. And he said it'd get, of course, super hot in the summer. But that wasn't until Helen was gone anyway. And then I'm like, don't go back into the attic, you doofus.
Yeah.
So he really wasn't the brightest person, was he?
Well, no.
Maybe his respiratory illness affected his brain. But yeah, it's always so freaky to hear the stories of somebody just living in your house and you don't know it. Like the Hinterkaifeck murders that you did, where it seems like somebody was living in their attic and the dad knew and was trying to find, and there was never anybody up there, and there were footprints in the snow, right? Like, that one's super disturbing.
And it's always like, could someone be living in my house? I don't think so, but...
Right? Like, again, our attic is super tiny, and it actually has insulation, unlike that one back then. It's all just wood,
ours has insulation, and I'm like... No, the dog would know.
Also, there is maybe an hour in the day where one of us is not up.
Yeah.
In this household. So
I feel certain the dog would know if someone was living there.
I feel like my cats would sit underneath our attic entry, which is in my daughter's old room, and just be staring up at it because they're cats.
Yes.
And I'd be like, what? Given we would think they were animals. But also, I'm awake all night. Like, they would never be able to move around up there without somebody hearing it.
No.
So, now I feel like I'm challenging someone here. Don't.
No.
Don't. But.
You will not take Shannon's cane away from her.
No.
I could tell you that right now.
I have a good grip. And boy, am I mean.
And after she startled and went, eek! Oh, eek! And then, motherfucker.
Right? Then there would be profanity. Then there would be violence. You guys, you don't want to do it. Stop. But, yeah. Stop.
Our
it's
health
not
and
an invitation.
Our health and well-being tip for the day is don't fuck with Shannon.
That's actually a good one.
Do you know? So I'm going to give a shout out to one of our fans because she's still so completely amused by something you said.
Oh.
Because you said, I like songs that tell stories. That's why I like Johnny Cash and Eminem.
No, it was Kenny Rogers.
Kenny Rogers, sorry. Oh, God. But anyway, this still stands. Kenny Rogers and Eminem.
That's right.
And she's like, she spit. She did a spit take when you said that, so.
Nice.
Hi, Amy.
I like it. Hi, Amy. Hey, Amy, do you want a cat? Because somebody's getting that cat. Because I swear on all that is holy. She's just up there looking around. She walks away from his door. Now she's going to get high on the bookshelf and continue to meow. She's Siamese, in case you can't tell. They never shut the fuck up. I do love a Siamese, but they do have a lot of personality.
They are fairly vocal kitters.
We had a good stretch for a while there. She hasn't really done this for many episodes. True. Like a couple months. She hasn't done this.
And knock wood, she hasn't done it when we've had a guest.
Oh, God.
Because that would be
fun. Like, I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. Thanks for listening to us.
Yes, we'll be back next week with something new and entertaining and exciting. I don't know what it'll be yet.
Wow. Thanks for that pressure.
Well, it will be new and it will be entertaining.
In one way or another.
And just
right.
How much sanity we'll have intact. That's the exciting part.
Ooh, that's a diminishing return.
We didn't have much to start with.
Oh, well. We will have, next time we will have news about the conference that we attended.
We will.
I may even have news about StokerCon. If not, it'll be after that. But we may be able to string words together after conference. I'm not sure. And I'm starting a new job the week before conference. So I'll be doing training while stressing out about it.
I've done that. Been there.
Oh, well. I'm sure it'll be great. It'll be great to see old friends. We'll tell you all about it.
It will be great.
Bye, you guys. Thanks for listening.
We'll talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.